Security forces kill 16 suspected militants. Nigeria's main opposition party tells President Buhari to keep the military out of elections. And the Somali president visits Burundi as AMISOM prepares for a pull-out. Hello everyone, welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. We'll bring you the details on those stories in just a moment, but first, Penina Karibe with the day's business headlines. Penina.
Thank you, Beatrice. Coming up on Africa Live Business. Kenya's recently discovered crude oil deposits not enough to build a new refinery. And thousands of people stand to lose their jobs as Honda shuts down its only plant in the UK. I'll have details of those stories and plenty more others in just a bit. Beatrice, back to you.
Penina, thank you. And we begin in Egypt, where security forces killed 16 suspected militants. The militants were killed in two separate raids in the city of Arish in North Sinai. Security forces found weapons and ammunition. This comes a day after an explosive device killing 3 police officers in Cairo. A militant detonated the explosive while being pursued by police. One civilian was also injured in that attack. Well, a suicide bomber killed 3 Egyptian police officers on Monday morning, and police were following a lead for the suspect believed to be involved in previous bomb attacks. It is the 3rd terrorist attack in the country during the last 4 days.
After successfully defusing a bomb near a mosque last Friday, the police have been chasing the perpetrator. On Monday night, after confirming his whereabouts, they rushed to a populous neighborhood in Old Cairo. As soon as they caught him, he detonated a bomb, killing 3 policemen.
This is quite a mysterious attack. This individual does not appear to belong to any non-violent Islamic group in Egypt. He is not ISIL. Maybe he could be part of the violent groups that broke out of the Muslim Brotherhood or even Al-Qaeda. But there isn't much information about it. This comes at a sensitive time as Egypt approaches constitutional amendments. I think the target of this attack is to create disruptions during that political process.
The suicide bomber was previously arrested as a suspect in a criminal case. A year later, he was released without any charges due to lack of evidence. When searching his apartment, the police found a large quantity of explosive material, an indication he was planning further attacks.
This could be a newly created group. This suicide bomber definitely has a supporting group of other militants. This group definitely has the ability to create and detonate explosives, to monitor and spy on police personnel, and this is a possibility. The explosive device was created to cause maximum damage to surrounding people. This cannot be work of an amateur.
It's the 3rd terrorist attack reported in Egypt in less than a week. On Saturday, ISIL claimed responsibility for killing 15 military personnel in North Sinai.
Security campaigns against these terrorist organizations are ongoing tirelessly here in Egypt. On Tuesday morning, police forces say they have killed 16 militants in a crossfire in North Sinai. But as these militants are starting to sneak to take shelter in residential areas and create explosive labs there, it has almost become impossible to eradicate them entirely. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Let's cross over to CGTN's Adel Mahroui. He's joining me live from Cairo. Adel, we have reports that Egyptian security forces have killed 16 suspected militants in 2 separate raids in the city of Arish. What is the latest on this development?
It comes part of the comprehensive counter-terrorism operation that is going on in northern Sinai and the rest of the country. The police forces, the National Security Bureau has received intelligence information about the whereabouts of the suspected militants. According to a police statement released today, as they approached the sites in both raids, the militants opened fire first, and a crossfire happened. The police raided the place, and the total of casualties were 16, as you've said, 10 in the first raid and 6 in a separate raid, both in Al Arish city in North Sinai.
Adel, well, this is also coming a day after another explosion in central Cairo that killed 3 policemen. Do we know if these raids are planned, and how exactly are they coordinated?
It doesn't seem that today's raid early in the morning is related to the attack that happened on Monday night. At least the official statements from the Interior Ministry did not relate both of them together. Usually such raids are based on a collective work and weeks-long, if not even months or years, about information gathering from the Egyptian Intelligence Bureau and the National Security Bureau, along with coordination with the Egyptian military intelligence. Once they verify the information, the raids proceed, and therefore it is very unlikely that what has happened today about the 16 militants reported killed earlier this morning would be a raid just organized on Monday night. It is not customary to the Egyptian security forces. However, the timing, of course, is understandable to make it a bit suspicious or make it seem more related, but officially it is not.
Right, so Egypt has been fighting an Islamist militant insurgency since 2013, mostly concentrated in the North Sinai region. What's the government doing, though, to address this security challenge?
The security challenge remains one of the biggest concerns and priorities for the Egyptian government. Just a few days ago, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi gave a speech at the Munich Security Conference, and there he spoke about the challenges that not just Egypt faced, but the entire region, North Africa and the Middle East. Once he came back, and this was after the attack reported on Saturday, where ISIL claimed killing 15 military officers. Once he arrived from Munich the next day, President al-Sisi held an urgent meeting with the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces. At that time, the exact details up to date about what happened inside the meeting itself has not been revealed. It seemed that whatever is going on is further security plan in the Northern Sinai region, but it's also a reflection that all the government, up to the president himself, are so much involved on the first-hand level about the Egypt security file, and they're doing a huge effort trying to collect and put an end to this rising threat of terrorism. But as you've seen in my story minutes ago, these terrorists no longer take shelter in remote areas like in Northern Sinai. They have infiltrated the society. They live among the public. They sneak among them. They create explosive labs among civilians, which has become not just extremely dangerous, but also very challenging to point out and try to find out these dangerous elements out of the regular daily lives of society. So basically they can hide anywhere in the country, and therefore that's why it has become a supreme challenge for the entire nation.
Adel Mahroui joining us there from Cairo. Thank you. Keep the military out of elections. Nigeria's main opposition party, the People's Democratic Party, has told President Muhammadu Buhari. The comments follow President Buhari's comments that those threatening to disrupt Saturday's vote will do so at the risk of losing their lives. CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam has more.
I really give the military and the police to be ruthless. We are not going to be blamed that we want to rig the election. I want Nigerians to be respected. Let them vote whoever they want across the parties. I'm not afraid of that. I have gone through, as you said, the whole 36 states and Abuja. I went round. I think I have got enough supporters across the country to look after me. So I am going to warn anybody who thinks he has enough influence in his locality to lead a body of thugs to snatch boxes or to disturb the voting system. He will do it at the expense of his own life.
The comments from President Muhammadu Buhari continues to draw reactions from various quarters. Nigerians will vote in a general election this weekend, but numerous reports and even the government has raised concerns of a possible election violence. President Buhari is seeking re-election into office. His main rival, Atiku Abubakar, candidate of the main opposition PDP, says the president's directive to security forces is unacceptable and unconstitutional.
It is quite shocking for any head of state to utter such words in a democracy. And we will not accept it from General Buhari in this country. We have fought more ruthless dictators than himself. free, fair, and credible elections is that the people are able to cast their vote without fear of violence.
There are 91 political parties in all, but the contest is between the ruling APC and opposition PDP. The blame game is on between the two main contenders and with no end in sight. It's a conduct both parties have signed against in numerous peace pacts meant to avert a recurrence of election violence. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
Well, let's get more on Nigeria's elections. CGTN's Phil Haza is joining me now from Abuja. Phil, there has been a series of meetings by the Independent National Electoral Commission. What is the latest on their preparation for this election?
Well, thank you. Well, there's been, an announcement that there will be daily meetings with the media representatives across the country, with the stakeholders, the election observers, and a host of other political players that are concerned with the forthcoming elections. Well, so far, the Independent National Electoral Commission has assured Nigerians, the electorate, that start looking at movement of personnel and materials. They are already working towards it to ensure that we don't have such logistics and operational issues that we had last week that caused the elections to be rescheduled. So they have, for example, today was dedicated to ensuring that a proper and extensive audit was done by all the stakeholders, the community of election observers at the different vaults of the central bank across the states, the 36 states and capital of Nigeria, to ensure that those materials are still intact, and also to ensure that they can move these materials starting from tomorrow to the different local government areas, 774 local government areas. And also they have adjusted the start of the election time on Saturday from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. That is because the Commission has insisted that all materials and personnel must arrive at the different polling units at 7 a.m. latest, so that the election can commence. They've also said that the PVC, the total number of registered voters, the PVC collection, and the breakdown of those collection according to the states will be made available to the populace by tomorrow. They've also said that 95% completion of reprogramming the card readers. All the card readers, about 180,000 of them, have been done and will be completed by tomorrow. Quite a number of things they have made advances with in terms of the preparations ahead of the elections.
Well, Phil, do give us a clearer understanding of what exactly may have transpired prior to the rescheduling of this election, because we are receiving reports claiming that INEC officials received the sum of about $1 million ahead of the presidential election. What can you tell us about the allegations?
Well, that report or allegation was targeted at the INEC REC in Adamawa State, but I must say that the INEC Commission, through its official social media outfit or platform, has come out to disassociate itself with that story, saying that there was no offering of any sort by anyone to the Adamawa, REC, state REC, that there was no offering of $1 million or property in, another country and all of that, that they are disassociating themselves from that story. I must give kudos to the Commission, in spite of the fact that they have received quite a number of knocks as a result of the rescheduling of the last election to this Saturday. They have also ensured that they are engaged constantly with the media, with the people, the electorate, with the political parties, and of course the community of election observers, to ensure that they put out fake news and also clarify on their plans ahead of the elections.
Philly has for us there in Abuja. Well, it's been 3 days now since the presidential elections were postponed in Nigeria. While the electoral body has now fixed February the 23rd for the election, the big question is whether the controversial shift in the election days could impact voter turnout on election day. CGTN's Deji Badmus reports.
It's one shift in election that many Nigerians are still finding it difficult to come to terms with. While this is not the first time presidential elections would be delayed in the country, this one is actually not what many had bargained for.
People that they travel home, some of them borrow money to travel. So are you telling me that they will come back, then they'll start going back this Saturday again for voting?
Indeed, many voters travel to their hometowns and places where they're registered to vote in the election. Going back again could be a problem. To help address that problem, one of the petroleum marketers' unions in the country have asked their members to slash petrol prices by 5 naira between February 20th and 25th to motivate those who would be traveling again for the election to do so. Some of the local commercial airlines in the country have also followed suit, giving out heavily discounted fare for those traveling to vote. It's something that's never happened before.
It would help to drive up voters turnout because you recall I said earlier on that people have expended resources. If I've expended, say, XY amount of money to get to somewhere first time, and I have to repeat the exercise because it's a national duty, and somebody is telling me that, no, take out I will bear the Y for you, you bear only the X. It will, in a way, it will motivate me that, no, somebody is trying to ensure that I perform my civic responsibility. So it's a morale booster.
Now, judging from similar situations in the past when general elections were postponed, there is a chance turnout for the coming election may be affected. Let's quickly take a look now at the following slides. Before the 2011 general election was postponed, many had projected a high voter turnout because of the high number of registered voters for that year. But following the postponement of the election, only 53.68% eventually turned out to vote on the rescheduled election date. We saw the same situation in 2015. Everyone was prepared for the scheduled date of the election when it was suddenly shifted. On the rescheduled date of the election, only 43.65% of course, the registered voters turned out on election day to vote. So here we are now in 2019 with another postponed election. Now, before the shift, the general forecast had been that of a huge turnout because of the 84,004,084 registered persons now to vote for this election. But with the dramatic postponement, it now remains a question of wait and see what the turnout would be this time around. Deji Badmo, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
And let's broaden this discussion a little bit more now and get the impact on Nigeria's economy and Nigeria's political scene. Dr. Emeka Okwengu is joining us from Lagos. He's an economist and chairman of the Alliance for Social Democrats based in Abuja. Dr. Emeka Okwengu, thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. Let's first look at how this has affected Nigeria's business. How has the postponement of the elections affected businesses and the Nigerian economy in terms of businesses? How much has the country lost, both medium, small, and big business?
Thank you. I think there are two ways you need to look at this loss, to the economy. First, it's important that we begin, by stating that the losses were expected because everybody knew there was going to be an election. Businesses were going to be shut down because there was going to be an election. But what wasn't emphasized was the postponement that had now occasioned, the recoup of those losses, because it simply means that in another 1 week, more losses are going to be occasioned. Having said that, to answer your question directly, yes, about 196 billion, was lost in the stock exchange. I think the numbers are still counting. To the economy directly, I think about 2.7 trillion, vis-a-vis losses to the GDP. But in looking at the losses, it's also important we look at the more losses that would have happened if we went ahead to have an election, that didn't turn out right. So it's important to interrogate why the elections were postponed. Did it have any credibility? Is there any currency to it? Would it have been better to postpone? Would it have been better for us to have run with an election that was skewed, especially when, this is probably the most contentious, one of the most stiff, competitions in the electoral history of Nigeria.
So in terms of the market itself, because the market reacted rather negatively to the sudden election postponement, how badly was the market affected and how much did the market drop?
Yeah, it's badly hit, but I mean, it's all about perception. You're talking about probably the country risk and the investor, confidence in the country. I want to say that the losses, like I said to you earlier, was envisaged, was known. Everybody knew that airlines weren't going to be operating. Everybody knew that businesses were going to be shut down. But I think what should worry us more is, are we going to be recovering from this setback, if you may? So far, we've lost money. The economy has lost some steam and speed. It's bad as it is, but it is not a complete disaster, because you're not talking about these elections being completely cancelled. The reasons that the electoral body gave to cancelling the elections are germane as it were. It hasn't been refuted, and they have said they are not cancelling because of any political pressure. They are not cancelling because of insecurity. They are just cancelling because they found out that the logistics, didn't go the way they planned it. So I think the economy will recover. As much as it has losses, I'm very, very optimistic by the time we get it right on Saturday, and the first elections, which are the most critical, most important, if you may, hold, then I think we're going to be back onto the track of a recovering economy back onto its
So you're
trajectory.
very optimistic about a recovery in this in the Nigerian economy. To take us through the phases, though, how exactly do you see that recovery taking place in the short term, the medium term, and in the long term, given the dip in investor confidence here?
Great. It's a great question. I mean, the investor confidence hasn't been badly shaken, because, like I said to you before, this is not a cancellation. This is not as a result of probably insurrections or insurgencies or any social or civil disorder. This is as a result of an electoral body which is empowered by law to shift elections, to shift them. So I think that the first and most immediate for us to be able to recover is for us to have the elections hold on Saturday, like the electoral body has said they would. If for whatever reasons the elections are held on Saturday, then I think there's going to be some really heavy dent on investor confidence. I also think that if there's any political risk or political loss of confidence, it might even be, by the utterances of the ruling party. So for me, in the immediate, I think the Saturday elections are very critical. They must hold for us to be able to return investor, confidence into the system. And again, like everywhere else in the world, especially the development world, anytime you have elections like this, the stock market, usually people try to put their funds into safe havens because they say money is a coward. I'm also of the view that if we are able to also now hold these elections scheduled for the 23rd, which is next Saturday, investors are going to be returning back into the market. And in the medium, what we need to do is to begin to now open businesses up, try to see where we can be able to hedge, those that need some level of hedging. And then in the long run, stick to the policies as much as we're able to stick to our policies of ease of doing business. Okay, I think eventually, the economy will pick up again, albeit slowly.
Dr. Emeka Okwengu joining us there from Abuja, I must add. Thank you very much for your input. You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. The Somali president visits Burundi as AMISOM prepares for a pullout. And stakeholders in Zimbabwe urge for the use of radio mediums to spread peace.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's head to the Horn of Africa region, where the African Union is due to withdraw some of its troops serving in Somalia. Meanwhile, the Somali president is in Burundi to assure authorities in that country of Mogadishu's utmost gratitude for the sacrifice portrayed by Burundian troops in the fight against Al-Shabaab. From Mogadishu, CGTN's Abdulaziz Bilo with the latest.
It's President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo's first official visit to Burundi as head of state, and was received by his counterpart Pierre Nkurunziza in the capital Bujumbura. The visit comes ahead of a troop drawdown by Burundi that forms bulk of the multinational peacekeeping force in Somalia known as AMISOM. Burundi is now expected to reduce its uniformed personnel by 1,000 soldiers by the end of February, in accordance with a new UN Security Council resolution passed last year. With over 5,000 troops, Burundi is the second biggest contributor to the peacekeeping mission that has helped Mogadishu turn the tide against the war on terror. Analysts say the president's visit is one aimed at acknowledging Burundi's role in pacifying Somalia and to assure authorities there that foreign troops will eventually have to hand over security responsibilities to Somali forces.
This drawdown is part of AMISOM's exit strategy. 1,000 soldiers from the Burundi contingent will leave Somalia who are based in the Middle Shabelle region. It is an issue that all troop contributing countries will have to face, and no one is aimed at singling out forces from Burundi. Eventually, AMISOM will leave and Somali forces will remain in charge.
AMISOM commanders recently announced a new concept of operation that includes targeted operations against Al-Shabaab, which will be implemented in several phases. It will also have to reconfigure some of its forward operating bases and hand over others to government forces.
This is a new spirit that we must encourage to make it a living one for purposes of making it endurable for the time we're going to be in Somalia. We have to plan and work together with the Somalis at that level. And that same vein should be cultivated for the non-military component to enhance that degree of cooperation, support, togetherness, so that we make the next phase of our mission a different one.
Authorities in Burundi have expressed dissatisfaction over the move, insisting that the drawdown must be balanced. Officials in the country have accused the European Union of pushing for Burundi's exit from Somalia after it imposed sanctions on the country in 2016, targeting individuals deemed to be undermining democracy, violating human rights and fomenting violence. Al-Shabaab has in recent months stepped up attacks against African Union forces, targeting convoys using deadly roadside bombs, mostly planted along key supply routes that are used by allied forces. The Somali government has welcomed the move by the African Union to reduce its troops here in the country. At the same time, expressed concerns of a possible resurgence by the Al-Qaeda-linked group that seeks to overthrow the Somali government. Instead, Mogadishu wants its forces strengthened before AMISOM pulls out. Abdulaziz Bilon, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Meanwhile, the federal government of Somalia and the United Nations have unveiled the 2019 portfolio of the UN Secretary General's Peace-Building Fund. And as CGTN's Alexandria Majala reports, $14 million has been earmarked for the support of new state-building projects in the country. Take a look.
The fund will support 5 new projects. It will mainly focus on stabilization, internally displaced persons, reconciliation and state-building processes, among other major things.
Each of these 5 projects is important. Our area of focus is the liberated areas and areas that have weak administration. The objective is to assist them in areas of reconciliation and help set up administration structures to enable them to develop.
The Secretary General's Peace-Building Fund has supported Somalia's peace-building process since 2009. To date, it has invested approximately $45 million in the Horn of Africa.
These programs are intended to be what we call catalytic, which means that we're trying out quite risky approaches towards peace building. So where maybe normal donors would not necessarily put their money because they think that it is too risky to invest, this is where the peace building fund will go.
The UN has also noted that there is a need to support the stabilization and reconciliation efforts in Somalia by comprehensively tackling the problem of displacement.
This country is very quickly urbanizing, not just Mogadishu, but also places like Baidoa and Bosaso. And it's very important that we support that urbanization process that actually is fueled by these internally displaced people that either as a result of drought or as a result of conflict coming towards these cities. And the longer they actually stay and are displaced, the less likely they are to return to where they once came from.
The fund aims to address Somalia's peace-building priorities as outlined in the Peace-Building Priority Plan, the National Development Plan, the National Stabilization Strategy, the Wajadir Framework, and the National Reconciliation Framework. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Stakeholders in Zimbabwe's broadcasting services sector are urging policymakers to utilize media channels, particularly the radio, to educate and inform communities properly and foster peace and harmony in Zimbabwe. According to the stakeholders, radio channels have a greater outreach than other forms of media. The country has seen weeks of civil turmoil, which have been induced by continued socio-economic rot in the country. The Zimbabwean government says it is currently working on licensing community radio stations to foster freedom of expression and development in the country. So far, the country has 5 community radios already licensed.
Radio is capable of penetrating what we call audience social skin, to awaken their emotions and open their minds to national issues such as dialogue, tolerance, and peace building. Radio has proven to be the best medium to prevent potential conflict and violence. Radio has power to broaden civic participation in development in any country at all.
Meanwhile, Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa has reassigned 4 army generals to the diplomatic service. This follows a shake-up in the security sector following allegations of misconduct and abuse during a recent crackdown on anti-government protests.
Among the 4 generals who've been retired is Major General Anselm Sanyatwe, who commanded the army's response to post-election protests that resulted in 6 deaths on August 1st, 2018. An independent inquiry into those protests found that the army used disproportionate force that caused the fatalities. He and 3 other generals are due to be posted to diplomatic missions, which will be announced once bilateral consultations are concluded, according to a statement released Monday. The unexpected changes are seen as a response to mounting international pressure to act on allegations of brutality against the army whilst quelling anti-government protests last month, and a move by President Emmerson Mnangagwa to consolidate his control of the influential military. The shake-up coincides with the absence of the former army commander, now Vice President Constantino Chiwenga, who led the operation that elevated Emmerson Mnangagwa to the presidency. He's currently out of the country undergoing treatment. Farang Wakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Let's now go to Penina Karibe for the latest business news. Penina.
Thank you, Beatrice. Coming up in business news tonight. Kenya's recently discovered crude oil deposits not enough to build a new refinery. And thousands of people stand to lose their jobs as Honda shuts down its only plant in the UK.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues and taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
Beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra. Hello, Naro.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads, where opportunity meets innovation, where profitable new markets collide with global trends. From the sound of an African bell on a stock market's floor to the shout of the trader in a bustling free market. It's colorful, vibrant, and exotic. CGTN stands at the gateway to Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. From Morocco to South Africa, we talk to the deal makers and actors who fuel its engines of growth. Only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Kenya's Ministry of Petroleum and Mining alongside Tullow Oil have held a press conference in Nairobi. The meeting was aimed at providing an update on the early oil pilot scheme launched last year. According to government officials, the crude oil deposits discovered so far are insufficient to warrant building a refinery. Tallow experts estimate that there are about 560 million barrels of 2C proven and probable oil reserves. This would translate to 60,000 to 100,000 barrels per day of gross production. A refinery would, however, only make money if it has a refining capacity of at least 400,000 barrels per day.
The phase one, the approach to how we develop this, moving from the 2,000 barrels of oil per day to 80,000 barrels of oil per day, is a step change. To be able to do that, we will need to do certain things that we haven't done so far. For example, the 2,000 barrels of oil a day will be out of about 5 wells. To get to 80,000, we'll be drilling about 300 wells, including 200 producer and about 100 injector wells. So the scale is significantly different.
I think the benefits that are going to come from the Lapsset corridor are not more than what the pipeline can supply. This is a business. That's the first thing. It's not a social project. Crude oil production is a business. So what is in the best interest of this country from a business point of view is it building a refinery? I think most of you who know about refining will know unless you have something like 400,000 barrels per day, it just doesn't make any sense from a refining economics point of view. We've got 80,000 barrels a day. So either we give the money to a social project, or call a refinery, or we take the revenue and put it in, like you had what the Treasury said last week, into a sovereign wealth fund, and that goes to build other infrastructure that's required.
Staying in Kenya, earnings from coffee have dropped 13% on the back of lower Arabica prices on the international market. Data from the Coffee Directorate shows that farmers earned $41 million in the 4 months to January this year against $47.7 million in the same period last year. Global market prices at ICE in New York, which is the Directorate's benchmark for Arabica coffees, have been experiencing a 13-year low since November last year. This affected the average price at the auction, with a 50-kilogram bag dropping from about $248 to about $188 in the review period. Kenya is seeking to raise the amount of coffee roasted locally from 5 to 10% annually over the next 5 years. Let's turn to mining now. An AngloGold Ashanti has put its Cerro Vanguardia mine in Argentina up for sale. This is the second mine that has been put up for sale, with the Sadiola mine in Mali also on the selling block. The company has appointed a new CEO, Kelvin Dushnisky, in efforts to change the portfolio. According to him, Cerro Vanguardia remains a profitable asset but holds no option to build critical mass around its new strategy. The mine has been in the AngloGold portfolio for 2 decades. A significant gas discovery by French energy giant Total is expected to be a game changer for South Africa's lucrative oil industry and stagnant economy. The find represents around 1 billion barrels of oil and is located about 175 kilometers of the southern Cape Coast of South Africa. CGTN's Angelo Coppola tells us more.
The find and its prospects are a much-needed boost for South Africa, considering the current stagnant economy.
South Africa is a net importer, a significant net importer of oil and gas. We're looking at about $20 billion which South Africa spends to import oil and gas products in a year. So, of course, having indigenous South African resources to be able to fuel the South African economy is great news.
The country's legislators have made a start to enable development of the oil and gas sector.
Especially when you're looking at local content laws, we do think that South Africa needs to do more to be able to enable the environment for service companies to actually use the whole value chain of the oil and gas industry to benefit the common man in South Africa.
But not everyone's excited about the find, and that's based on the 2018 Intergovernmental Report on Climate Change released in 2018, which suggests that the world had until 2030 to act on climate change.
That means that we have to shift urgently away from fossil fuels. If we're doing that, we shouldn't be exploring for any new fossil fuels anywhere. We should be focusing on shifting away from the fossil fuels that we use currently. We believe that the risks associated with Total's find far outweigh any potential benefits.
Regardless of the potential climate change concerns, industry players want government to do more.
So what the government needs to do is certainly to simplify the regulation for the oil and gas sector to make sure that we have as many companies as possible coming in with the right kind of technology to drill and give South Africa the energy resources which it needs.
While everyone's excited about the find, it's going to be between 5 and 10 years before there's any kind of flow of either gas or oil. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Still in South Africa, the Reserve Bank is preparing a process of regulation for the country's cryptocurrency market. It has issued a consultative policy paper focused on the risks and benefits of cryptocurrencies in South Africa. CGTN Sumitra Naidu reports.
The crypto revolution has taken the global financial market by storm, but some are getting rich while others are losing money. South Africa is now looking at how it can protect the market and consumers.
The one fundamental regulation that you're going to see there is that it should be seen as not a currency, but it should be allowed to work as if it were a currency. One other regulation is that these people must be registered. So the anonymity which is associated with crypto assets is going to be broken. On that side, I think it's good. We should all welcome. But the excessive nature of the regulation does worry me.
Most crypto service providers and traders have enjoyed operating unregulated in South Africa thus far. But the Reserve Bank is looking to get some regulation in place by the end of the first quarter of 2019.
It is clear that the authorities want to regulate it much more tighter over time, and a total ban may be possible, or at least an attempt to totally ban these so-called crypto assets as well is also something that could be considered over time.
Cryptocurrency exchange service provider Luno operates in over 40 countries. They set up shop in South Africa in 2013 and currently have 2.4 million users globally.
Regulators around the world have been fairly slow to form their opinions around cryptocurrency, specifically regulations, and that basically made banks around the world the de facto regulators, which made it very difficult for cryptocurrency service providers like Luno, like exchanges, to open bank accounts. The Reserve Bank's proposal is not to regulate cryptocurrency like Bitcoin itself, it's to regulate service providers. And I think that's a very positive move as it will provide consumers and potential future consumers with the confidence that the service providers who they are dealing with will be able to define regulatory standards.
But some believe this is an attempt to have control over the crypto market. As the name suggests, digital currencies are produced by computers, therefore they are not owned or managed by government or countries.
We have a very strong financial markets and very strong financial institutions. We are absolutely ideally positioned to encourage the world's brightest people to use South Africa to develop this technology even further. But instead of doing that, I'm afraid we've got Big Brother, and Big Brother is going to stifle this new technology.
Public comment on the regulations closed Friday. The Reserve Bank is hoping to implement the new rules in the next few months. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Millions of Zimbabweans living and working in South Africa are struggling to send money home to their families. Inflation in Zimbabwe has again skyrocketed after fuel prices were pushed to record highs. Sumitra Naidu has more.
90% of all money transfers from South Africa go to Lesotho, Mozambique and Zimbabwe. Millions of Zimbabweans live in South Africa primarily for work. Sending money home is often the only means of survival for their families. But most of the money is spent on the exchange rate and the high cost of bank transfers and other transactions.
A person who has, for example, 2,000 rands, who can survive on 2,000 rands, here in South Africa, say they rent maybe a single room at about 1,000 or 700 and buy food. That 2,000 rand cannot be sent in Zimbabwe and be sufficient because of, the exchange rate. Because at the end of the day, when they send that money to Zim, you realize that it only translates to about maybe $100 or $150, and it's virtually, nothing.
Cross-border transport is already expensive, with Zimbabweans buying a lot more food items to send back home. It's a higher cost that many can't afford.
Rather than sending money to Zimbabwe, which becomes useless because they cannot buy anything, they are forced to buy goods here in South Africa and send them, as bulk goods. Even if it's groceries, it could be, clothing, it could be anything. Now, sending goods becomes much more expensive because now they have to use the services of, transporters, and transporters charge an arm and a leg.
Zimbabwe is experiencing its highest inflation rate since rates soared upwards of 79 billion% in mid-November 2008. Despite political change, the economy is struggling to recover. Unemployment, too, is at a record high.
The holding of the election in 2013, which marked the end of the transition, gave us a little bit of assurance. And then this last election, which took place late last year, in 2018, was meant to consolidate things further, similar to what has happened to the DRC. So the challenges that Zimbabwe faced has to do with the fact that we can change human beings, we can change leaders, they can change the language, as President Mnangagwa has done. The ruling party tries to refashion itself. But the structural factors that have caused problems in Zimbabwe do not die immediately. And they'll keep rising. The option that they took, which was a change from within, has one major folly, is that the very forces that were behind the problem over a period of time must now be behind solutions.
Zimbabweans living in South Africa cheered in 2018 when Robert Mugabe was forced out of office. But there was no mass move back to the country. Instead, more Zimbabweans are heading to South Africa. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Japanese manufacturer Honda Motors has announced that it will be shutting down its sole British plant in 2021 as it considers moving existing production to North America and other regions. Its CEO says the decision is not related to Brexit, but instead based on changes in the global market. The UK factory currently produces Civic hatchbacks for global sales. The closure of the factory in southern England is expected to result in 3,500 job losses as several other automakers reassess their presence in the UK and Europe. Honda's decision marks a big symbolic blow to British manufacturing amid the tumult of Brexit.
We have started talks with the union aiming to end the production of the completed vehicles at HUM in 2021. Similarly, we have decided to end the production of the Honda Civics at our four-wheel vehicle manufacturing factory in Turkey within 2021.
We'll leave it there for now, but still to come on global business. South Africa gears up for its budget speech amid worrying debt surrounding state farms. That's at the top of the hour. I shall see you then. For now, back to you, Beatrice.
Panina, thank you. And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's ahead. Ugandan models register for the controversial Miss Curvy pageant. And South Sudan families take part in a cultural event to boost peace.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Over 200 plus-size models in Uganda have already registered for the controversial Miss Curvy pageant. The event led to criticism from activists when it was announced, with many saying it objectified women. It will take place later this year. CGTN's Isabella Kiria reports from Kampala.
Very beautiful.
Celebrating plus-size models, Jackie Nabakar is among the over 200 who've signed up for Uganda's Miss Curvy pageant. She says the event helps prove that beauty comes in all shapes and sizes.
There are many times I tried to lose weight. There are many times I even took some pills to lose weight. So I want someone out there to be confident, a lady out there, a girl in school to be confident of the way they've been created by God.
The April pageant will be the first of its kind in the country. Organizers say they are providing a platform for plus-size models to push various causes.
They are going to champion many projects to help the ladies and the children out there, but on a platform as a beauty queen. So if a mother wins the crown, for example, and starts running up, help with her colleagues, running a project to help children, I think she'll be more empathetic because she's a mother.
Uganda's Ministry of Tourism says the pageant is an opportunity for the contestants and the country. The women will also play a role as tourism ambassadors for Uganda. Campaigners say that is disrespectful to women.
A country that is so much cherished for empowering women and upholding women's rights, coming up with such an absurd statement to exhibit women as tourist attractions like it was in slave trade, and the whole cabinet is quiet.
Uganda's parliament has debated the move and okayed the pageant. The winner here in April will move to Lagos, Nigeria to take part in the Miss Curvy Africa contest in August. The introduction of plus-size models is a new trend in Uganda and remains a topic of debate. Despite the criticism, those taking part in the pageant are determined to prove that you don't have to be skinny to be a beauty queen after all. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala.
Meanwhile, in South Sudan, families at a UN protection site in Juba took part in a cultural event. The UN, along with the families, committed to helping implement the country's latest peace deal. Here's more on that story.
On surviving. For one day, they get to sit back and watch the show. They, along with UN personnel, are participating in a cultural event. The event celebrated the revitalized peace deal. These families all fled to this camp during South Sudan's civil war.
POCs are a last resort though. They are not a good long-term solution. They are certainly not the best place for children to grow up if we want them to reach their full potential. And there is no doubt that families would prefer to be living in their own homes and communities.
Since the signing of the revitalized peace agreement, more internally displaced persons have been returning home.
As the demand to return increases, we need to ensure that people have the services and support they need, whether their communities, schools, healthcare, access to clean water, the ability to grow and harvest, to provide support packages to enable people to return.
In just a few months, the number of people at UN protection sites has dropped by around 10,000, with many more looking forward to returning home and celebrating their cultures. Astatal, CGTN.
And your sports news coming up next. Here's what's ahead.
Find your voice.
A landmark case has begun at the Court of Arbitration for Sport involving South Africa's two-time Olympic 800 meters champion Caster Semenya and the World Athletics governing body, the IAAF. Caster Semenya, also the 800 meters world champion, was in court for the first day of a hearing of the case in Lausanne on Monday. The 28-year-old is looking to overturn eligibility rules for hyperandrogenic athletes proposed by track and field governing body. The IAAF wants women with naturally elevated testosterone to lower their levels by medication before being allowed to compete in world-class races.